Hello.
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 How's it going, everyone?
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Imaginer.
So, how are you doing?
I'm pretty
I'm
good. I
pretty
have
good. I
a
have a
migraine
migraine
today,
today.
Sean, you got a little bit of
so
an echo.
I will struggle with words. That's how it shows up.
Oh, okay. No worries.
Hey, Vaishnav. Hi, Vaishnav.
Hey, River.
Terrific! Oh my God! What a decamp over from Hubs.
So, how are you guys? I heard Heather, you had a migraine. Oh,
Yep.
there's a remedy for that. Uh, you have to do Surya Namaskar.
I have to what? Will you type it in the chat?
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's not bad enough for me to take any meds right now.
I
Oh, yoga.
yes,
Oh.
I am too.
Hey, nice to see you guys here.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to see
Yeah,
you.
hi.
Yeah, how's the room running for everybody? Good. I didn't get to do really any load testing yesterday. I just got it set up on OVH.
Uh, Everything seems good to me.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Sean
was
is
saying
echoing.
earlier, Sean's echoing.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, see Sean.
Hi, Jimmy.
Yep, not this time, Heather.
Hey, hello there. Hey, guys.
Yeah, this time, Heather, you are safe. It's starting.
Yep.
Oh, I should open the chat also.
Okay.
Had it stuck on the people screen.
That sounded like fun. Just walking up the stairs.
Uh,
Or mad stapling. Just really, truly mad stapling.
Oh, you're talking about the noise in the background?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, my puppy is playing with a puzzle at the moment.
I was gonna say dog or child after my next guess. Yes.
Yeah, if they're
Aw.
like my dog, they wait until there's an open mic to do it.
That's right. That's right.
Could be, yep.
Yeah, it's one of those puzzles where you have to spin something to unlock a drawer, but he's figured out that if he just keeps hitting the drawer enough times, eventually the bone will just lock into place. So haven't had much luck teaching him the proper way to do it.
Okay, yep.
What a cool toy.
Skelter, I wanted to ask you, does your screen freeze when you send a text message?
If you use it in VR, yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things with hubs that I've known about for the longest time and have wanted to fix, but just haven't been able to. It's because when it creates the NVR text bubble, it runs like an HTML to canvas thing that blocks the main thread. So it just totally freezes rendering.
Okay, so that was actually kind of my one of the things I was hoping someone would have some insight on, because a lot of what I want to do is engineering apps or information dense apps,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of text on and UI generation. I was wondering, what libraries and techniques people are using to help with that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's always I've always found it kind of curious that that's the way that they chose to do the like message bubble generation, because I feel like you could just do it with like an SVG of the bubble and a bit of like troika text or something. I don't know why they need the whole like they need to use like a DOM layout to set it up.
See there it goes again, right? So they render it as a texture, and then I guess it has to spend some time, doing the texture prep.
Mm.
But given how much I'd be changing a lot of the textures for GUI displays, information displays, I'm not sure how viable it'll be.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of those things that I hope with Community Edition and maybe hopefully more people that are gonna be running their own custom clients. Hopefully, we can like get something as the base truth for the thing and finally fix that. Um, oh, Hrithik, you have your hand up.
No, sorry.
Oh, you didn't mean to.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just it out as Heather tried to raise hand.
I see. I didn't even realize that was a thing you could do.
Ah.
Okay.
I was
yeah.
trying to just wave hi to Jonathan over there, but then
Ah,
I realized it was raised
it's-
hand.
Is
Sorry.
it this button here, like this? Am I?
Yeah, in the React, you have the actions as raise hand, and
I
when you
see.
go,
Yeah.
and
I
when you
usually
go
just
to the
use it
people tab,
wave.
you see
Yeah.
it
Interesting.
people sidebar.
Mm.
Interesting. So, like, did that get integrated into the VR part of Hubs though? I'm not sure.
The well, the React panel shows up. I know in VR when you bring it up. I don't know if the actions. I imagine it would be. I'm on desktop because I'm also running the stream camera, so I can't exactly check a headset right this second. But
Skelter could.
yeah,
Skelter.
Skelter, do you have a raise hand button somewhere?
in like where your reactions would be.
Oh, okay, let's see. Okay, good. I'm unmuted. All right. I see a wiggle my hand button. Let's see if
Okay, so
Okay.
that's like the clapped reaction.
Yeah, that's the regular wave one.
Do you see
There should
anything
be
that
another one like
specifically
that.
like says raise hand next to it?
Something like this.
Terrific.
Whoa, right in front of his
Okay.
face.
Yeah.
I'm looking for it.
Pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
It's
All
good
right.
thing we
How do
really
I get rid of the emote?
If you just toss it
Just
away, it
let
should
it go.
expire.
Yep.
Stuck.
Keep trying.
That's weird. They usually fly away as soon as you like toss them.
Dude, you're doing
I can't
the
run
right
away
thing.
from it either.
Okay, let me see if I can grab it. There we
That's
go.
true. Somebody else grab it. There you go. All right. And it stopped.
There it goes.
All right. Okay.
Whew.
So, all right. Here's a pin. Can I get rid of the pin?
Should be able to.
Usually, I take initiative of grabbing others' objects.
You should just need to hover
Yes,
it,
you
hold
do.
A, and then it should bring up the menu to delete.
Uh-oh. Okay.
How long did it take you to load in, D Panther? I did notice that too is like not quite as snappy as
That pen up, I
Like
think I might
demo
have thrown
server.
it away. I don't know if you still see it.
I think it's gone.
I am using the like lowest compute tier for the Kubernetes like node pool on this, so that might be the cause for like the slightly longer load times. I think it's B27 is the model, which it still has 2 vCPU and like I want to say 8 gigs, but more than a minute. Oh dang, that didn't take me that long. I wonder if it's because it's hosted in US East, maybe?
Yeah, that could be the. Shouldn't be the reason, but should be. Actually, it took time for me to seeing that we had 6 people in the room, but still the load time for me was a lot. So,
Hmm.
and I've also hosted few small events. So, like when we have a 2 vCPU and 4 GB RAM, that should be sufficient. But I think it's somewhat to do with the bandwidth that your compute or your server gives you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's probably still. Yeah, East Coast quick to load in. Yeah, that would make sense because you're the closest to the thing. I definitely
Yeah.
still need to do a bit of configuration with it too. Right now, like I don't have any persistent storage, so like the Postgres database is running like in the pod, and then the data is also I think on one of the node pools. So I need to get like some block storage on OVH, which I don't think is going to be too expensive. I'm not sure how much I want to get at first, but I need to do that. I need to probably set up an external Postgres database so that way I can handle this node going down and not losing everything. Thanks, Heather. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been you that's been like helping coordinate some of the joint forces stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Did you want to maybe talk a bit about that for some people here who may not have been keeping super in the loop with the current state of things?
Sure. The good and the bad, the ugly, or do you want the pretty version of
Give
what's
us the
going
good,
on?
bad, and the ugly.
Okay, the good, bad, and the ugly. Several of us in the Hubs community have stepped forward to just see what we can do in the entire situation. We've organized at this point about 4 focused, based on all the community's concerns. We and all the community themselves just self-expressed all of their concerns of all kinds. We heard all kinds of different areas of Hubs that people were really worried about. Everything from the latest in behavior graphs all the way to how do you set up and run community edition. All kinds of concerns have been streaming in. So we sort of aggregated all of those into about 4 topic areas and asked for volunteers to kind of take leads in those 4 areas. They are going to start working. Those 4 teams are going to start working next week. I think now kind of like the bad, maybe that was the good. I think we're probably going to have to approach Mozilla very quickly. Hope, my personal hope is that we approach them next week with basically what will end up being the community offer. And then I want to pressure Mozilla that we need an answer on that offer by the end of next week. So by this coming Friday, we need an answer. Because if we're going to set up something like a nonprofit or a foundation, just estimatingly wise, we're thinking that's a 3-month runway we need to run, and we'll barely have that time before June 1 comes. So I want to push Mozilla and say, look, you guys have been watching us and hearing us, and they can read our meeting notes, and they've seen what's been going on in the Discord for Hubs. So it shouldn't come to as a surprise to them that we've been organizing to think that is there some way we can do some kind of purchase, gift, license, something. We don't know. And that's why we kind of want to get the offer out and hear back from them pretty darn quickly, because that will predict if anything after that is happening. Next week we're also going to start. Liam and I don't know, is he come in? I don't know. He may come in. If he comes in, he'll be as Disco. Liam and I have been working on the organization, and we've spun up a separate Discord so that we can take the conversation over there, which will be out of Mozilla's eyes.
Could you drop a link to that, by the way?
No, I cannot, because we're going to release it next week.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Yep. Come to the meetings that we'll have next week, and we'll give it out there. But as of right now, we're not going to give it out in any other way. Don't pressure me on this one, but are you guys aware that one Discord cannot share the link to another Discord? Have you ever noticed that?
How do you mean?
It seems like there's a built-in setting in Discord that you can't share a link from one server in another server. So
like sending
Discord,
like a link to a channel message specifically in another server? Or?
Just sending another Discord server. I think it's a setting I saw when we were setting it up. And actually, Liam himself said he thought about sharing a link, and he realized he would get zinged for it. And if you get zinged in Discord, it's possible you get reduced powers, right? So he's like, well, this would be the very wrong time for me to get reduced powers. I think, though, if we go back, step back just a second and breathe, I think it has to do with the fact that Discord communities were always meant to be built as person to person, right? I play a game, you play a game, we meet each other, I hand you the link as a person. So it's always meant to grow that way. Hey, come over to my Discord. Have you been on our Discord? Here's a Discord. I always share Discord links in one-on-one DMs in Discord.
Mm-hmm.
But sure enough, I don't think I've ever successfully seen one Discord server link shared inside of another Discord server. It feels like Discord somehow deletes it or won't recognize it. Recognizes it as spam or something. I don't know.
That's weird, because I have a whole channel that's just links to other Discord servers on the WebXR Discord.
Okay, maybe you can do it because you're the admin of your own.
Maybe.
I tried to. It worked for me.
Okay. Well, we're being hesitant then. We're being conservative, and we'll release it next week, M2. But I would say it'll be in the Hubs community as kind of the obvious place. I can pass you the link then when we do it if you like.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So that was a long explanation for something that doesn't matter then. All right. What is the ugly of this entire situation? Bear in mind that internal memo that I hope you all did see from Mozilla says nothing about the community. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. It's media and external people from Mozilla who've been talking about the community. So that does not bode well, is all I'll say.
Yeah, Mozilla is frustrating at times, which is a shame because I've used Firefox as my main browser for probably over a decade at this point, and I don't have any particular desire to switch to Chrome or anything else, but it's
me too. Yeah,
you just look at them and stop giving me reasons to dislike you. It's
Mozilla don't know how to close projects.
No.
Or how to file. I had issues with their implementation of WebXR, of their own WebXR exporter that are still. I still feel them to this day. They didn't have any message on any of the WebXR exporter related pages of them that it's deprecated, that no one is working on it. So I still get issues from people who trying to use both the Mozilla exporter and my own WebXR export together, and they don't know why it doesn't work. And because they have better SEO, so people, the first thing that they see is the Mozilla WebXR exporter on the Unity Asset Store and stuff like that. That if they had a good process on how to deprecate projects, it might won't happen, like stuff like this. And I guess it's much worse with the hubs.
Yeah, just think about how much like stuff that's on the demo server too that like might not get archived unless somebody manages to work something out, kind of like Jen was mentioning with the Internet Archive person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that does not surprise me, the Panther. That kind of tracks with how things have looked all across the board with Mozilla. Yeah.
Yep.
That would be hugely disappointing.
Yeah, but it would also kind of be par for the course. I
Agreed.
find I don't really have much faith in Mozilla at the moment.
Agreed.
But yeah, I think getting hubs, like passing it to a community controlled nonprofit sort of foundation would be the like best result for it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was the bad. What is the ugly?
No, that was the ugly was that the technical
Okay.
language from Mozilla doesn't say anything about the community. It's basically been reporters and ex-Mozilla workers, including recently ex-Mozilla workers, who have pointed out that the outpouring of support and concern in the Discord was remarkable. And it really was. I mean, I'm not trying to say this to make anybody feel uncomfortable, but the number of men expressing emotions was astounding. I need to say, I haven't seen so much in my life of people truly expressing regret and sadness. So the reporters have been picking up on that, but there's not a drop of that from Mozilla.
Yeah.
But it has been really comforting to see what community there is step forward and offer to help as much as they can. And even like I said, you know, M2, you getting this community edition up and running, we really do need that. That's the community needs some things. If the worst is going to happen, the community needs to be able to.
The audio's quite.
Hey Matt.
Hey Matt.
To
Oh, we can't hear us.
fix
Hey.
audio. Hello.
Hey Matt, can you hear us?
Trying to figure out how to. Oh man.
Oh, you're trying to configure stuff in VR.
Yeah, I'm trying to like figure out how to turn the volume up because it sounds. Actually, maybe just that person's far away when they're talking.
Yeah. I think for reference, if you hover over them and press A, I think you can control their volume.
Oh, over the person?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
I'm talking. Can you hear me now? I'm talking.
Yeah, yeah. I can sort of hear you. It's super quiet. I do have a cold, so maybe it's a function of my congestion. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the holding A thing works, and then there we go. I'm turning her volume up. Okay, now I can hear you.
Hi Matt.
There we go. That's better.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, good to have you. We were just talking about state of hubs and you know, community edition and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer, but also like perfectly understandable in terms of them not seeing the traction that they were hoping for. And I said it a few times, but I think that on balance, if they had to focus on one thing, I think that ethical AI is probably the most societal uplift thing they could focus on now, because I'm not sure that Hubs is going to get 2 times better by putting 2 times more money into it at this point.
But is it sustainable?
Is what sustainable?
Focusing on AI, as you described.
Well, I mean, I think that Mozilla, just because of like the origin of the company, they've always been very kind of fiscally sort of prudent, I would say. So, and they very much realize that they've kind of been around as long as they have because of a very tenuous deal with Google for ad redirection or search engine redirection. So they did it with Thunderbird as well. It's a very similar situation. They did it with all these other kinds of things, but they don't wait to get down to their last 100 million before they take these kinds of steps. They take these kinds of steps well ahead of any sort of problem. So are they going to focus on AI for 10 years? I don't know. But I think in the same way that focusing on WebXR, WebVR really early helped make sure that there was a good standards-based situation for everybody to work from, and then they kind of moved on from that. I think this is like a similar deal where they've made their existence proof. There's a bunch of sort of clones of hubs, right, that are all using these open standards. And, do they need to spend another $50 million to $100 million on it to have the impact on open standards and adoption that they've already had? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that's the framing of the question.
Oh, Matt, how was the load time for you coming in here?
It was good, but I am seeing the typical hubs problems that I saw even 2 years ago, which is every 90 seconds there's some big garbage collection that happens, and then like I look to the left or something, and then it's just all black space until the garbage collection is finished.
Well, I think
So-
I think that issue is the like in-world chat bubble generation.
There's me and is Dom in here? Me and Dom actually profiled it 2 years ago, and you can see this big sawtooth thing on the garbage collection profiler. Like there wasn't really an optimization pass across a lot of this stuff. And when I met up with him at GDC last year, like we were talking about, and he's like, it's probably easy to fix, but someone just needs to focus on it for a couple of weeks and really make it really optimize it across a couple of headsets in particular, because on desktop you don't notice it. You only notice it on mobile VR headsets where the single threaded performance is 1/5 of a even like a low end laptop.
I'm curious.
So I don't think it's a server thing. I think it's just the client side.
Yeah, I mean, there probably is definitely like performance improvements to me. And I was specifically referring to like the known issue of like, for some reason, in order to generate the VR chat bubbles, they run like a HTML to canvas tool to like, I guess, do the layout for the message.
Right.
And then that tool is blocking the main thread whenever it generates an image.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That'll also do
weird,
it. Yeah.
Because it should just be doing something to like an off-screen canvas and like going off to like a worker or something. But
right, but if you're not doing it in a worker, you're on the single-threaded JS main thread, and
it's
boom,
something I've
it.
wanted to try and fix for ages, and now that I have this community edition running, the next thing I'm gonna do is probably try getting a custom client working with it. Thankfully, Fabian, some people might know him as Utopia, like had made very good notes about how he set stuff up on OVH, which is what I used
Mhm.
as reference for this. So
Cool.
should be pretty straightforward to deploy a custom thing, I think. And then
It has
of
been
course-
really cool to see the documentation thing from last month or 2 months ago to try to like lubricate the kind of custom hub setup.
Yeah, 'cause Lord knows we need
it's-
it with all the Kubernetes interactions.
Well, I mean, could you imagine if it wasn't Kubernetes, if it was like copy this whole image and then pray that it all works?
Oh yeah,
Like,
I tried
it
setting
could
up
be
like
worse.
reticulum and dialog like outside of like a Kubernetes thing, just seeing if I could stand up the services on my own, and I couldn't.
Mhm. Yeah, I never had to dive into Kubernetes at any job I ever had. It's a word that I know and I kind of know what it does, but thankfully there was not thankfully like I hate it or whatever. Like I don't have an opinion about it, but at most of the jobs I've had, I've been firmly on the client side of things and not on the service side of things. So I never had to learn the ins and outs.
Yeah.
Coffee.
That's a good point. Yeah.
My suspicion, I think a lot of educational uses would give community edition a.
Either that or like, I imagine there's probably people too that can also be willing to offer their services to like stand up a hubs for
Yeah.
for clients.
It's just like there is for like WordPress. Like there's WordPress consultants or contractors that, do literally 16, 1-month jobs or 16 like 3-week jobs a year or something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of businesses that have come into the Discord to offer their services.
There was somebody in here like was it a year ago or maybe even like 2 years ago who was talking about kind of like making a hubs-like thing for WordPress instead of vice versa, so that you could just add a WordPress plugin. Do you remember who that was?
Yes, that was Anthony. Yeah, it's a 3 object viewer. He's AntPB on
Right.
Discord and Twitter, I think.
Right. Yeah, that might be an even shorter throw if you could figure out whatever WordPress does to deploy its kind of server side.
Not doing any hub stuff, but he is like getting really close at network multiplayer right now. So 3LV is also an open source project, supports VRM avatars. You can spin up a WordPress instance. It's an open source plugin that you can just get started in 5 minutes to have a multiplayer WebXR thing. He's just kind of working on the networking stuff currently, and it's getting pretty close.
Complete peer-to-peer room for hubs or for 3OV spot build? My understanding is that the reason we have dialogue is because the Media Soup SFU makes sure that everybody is able to get audio consistently, and that we're not relying on everybody like independently making that peer-to-peer connection. I guess because it would be more prone to dropouts. It's not my area of expertise, but I've set up something similar for an old project when I did voice chat for Robot Rally. I had to set up a Media Soup SFU.
Yeah, I think there's peer-to-peer like across like the big bad internet, and then there's peer-to-peer for local devices. And with local devices, latency, like variable latency and a bunch of other problems basically disappear. So it really depends on what kind of peer-to-peer that they're talking about.
But to bring it back to custom hubs clients, I'm curious what other people would be interested in seeing in, I guess, like, what extensions to hubs would people be like interested in seeing first, I guess, if I were to start picking up more development on a custom client. Jin mentioned VRM support in 3.0v, and I think that would definitely be a nice add in hubs as well.
Yeah, if like I noticed when I went to choose the avatar coming in here that like it's a it's kind of slim pickings,
Yeah,
and there was some really cool ones on the Hubs official meetups. But it would be amazing to be able to bring in all 230 something of the 100 avatars
definitely
in here.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's something I low-key want to make sure happens. Is that assets from other servers can be used in other servers in your server, so that you could just bring in an avatar from your own server and use it in like this one. And also to get a list of shared community assets so that you can just go there and grab an avatar from there or a scene and just plunk it in here.
Heather,
that was something.
Oh, sorry, Imaginary, you weren't
Mozilla
done.
should have done when they did the managed hosting. That was a perfect thing to do, like a cross-instance global list of free community assets, and they never went in that direction. So that's something I'd really like.
Yeah, Matt, to your point about the avatars, I intentionally just kind of brought in the bare minimum to set stuff up because
Sure.
once I get persistent data block for this, then I think I'll be good to start kind of loading it up with more assets. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that was on hubs is they have a list of like content packs, which I think in turn just kind of lead to I think they're on it like a GitHub repo or something. A lot of the like
I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Yeah.
Whatnot. Yeah. So I definitely think importing those and then figuring out a way to, like you mentioned, getting the 100 avatars in would be a nice boost to the selection as well.
Yeah, and for like Heather's idea of like speech to text, like there is a W3C browser API for doing that if the browser you're using supports it. And like on the Apple Vision Pro, for instance, I know it's 300 soon, yeah, but they're releasing like 2 a week or something. We are actively using the 100 avatars stuff for the product that we're building. But for Heather's thing, like it's not even that you even need to like run your own WASM service like locally and run the battery down. A bunch of the devices' operating systems have this support built in, either inherited from Chrome and it uses a Google online service, or in the case of the Apple Vision Pro, what I found when we were testing at the Apple Labs in November is that I could take that Apple Vision Pro offline and speech to text actually worked great. Yeah, which was really cool, which means it's some model that's running completely locally, which makes a lot of sense. You don't want people's accessibility to be removed if they're, on the subway or something.
Right.
So that speech to text thing, which would be awesome for just general accessibility, is probably cheaper and easier now than it was 2 years ago when those accessibility APIs, the web speech or whatever the W3C thing is called, were earlier.
Yeah. Plus, you'd think AI would have an input on that too.
Yeah, I mean, but
JS, you can run it in the browser. Transformer JS has a couple different models that you can use now of the Whisper Small, and there are a couple new ones that even are lighter weight and faster. But there are quite a few that run in the browser now.
Yeah, but for like mobile, I think about just mobile XR devices and battery life. and not just, and there's the general of how do you keep the frame rate up, but then there's the other thing of the battery life as well. And so I don't know that like executing those models in a JavaScript or even a WASM JIT is the going to yield like the performance per watt that you would want probably for reasonably long session times.
I can kind of speak to that. I worked on at Zesty. We did something with like AI agents you could talk to, basically, and and initially what I tried, I used Vosk, which is another speech-to-text thing, and it's like a 40 megabyte model thing, and I like trying to run that like with WASM worked fine on desktop, but Quest it couldn't handle it. It was like 4 or 5 second delay on messages, and it couldn't get it much better, so we ended up going for the polyfill that I wrote that uses an open source speech to text server to like send requests to,
which is off device, right?
Which is off device, yeah.
Right. And that's not a diss against the Quest 2 or 3 or whatever. It's just the reality of the silicon that's in the headsets. Like, it's a miracle that they do all the stuff that they do with the battery life that they do. But I think what that means that you have to be very, I don't know. I think you have to take a lot of performance things into account, like more upfront than you would if you were in Unity on desktop or something like that. Like there's a huge difference between, a 15 watt TDP versus like even a 45 watt TDP for like a PC tablet that has like an USB-C extended display port thing. There's just like it's like hard to quantify for people who aren't deeply technical. But I do wonder, like with WebGPU, like if you have an Apache TVP model that you compile down to WebGPU, if that would be efficient enough. Obviously, off device is still better. But I wonder if at that point you're getting enough hardware acceleration out of it that, and you're just kind of like completely avoiding the JavaScript or WASM JIT situation. If that begins to make it approachable. I haven't seen any. Apache TVM does have some benchmarks up on their site for their web GPU backend, but I don't think it was speech to text, which might be heavier than just straight, LLM type workloads.
Thanks for stopping by, Jonathan.
Yep. See you, Jonathan.
Oh, they have a booth at GDC. Yeah, I wish there was a better. I wish there was a like identical kind of offering for like open source text to speech that there is for speech to text. I feel like in my explorations, like the closest thing I could find that was like, I guess, accessible enough for me to launch up would be like Koki for text to speech. But I would have to set up the server to like interact with it myself, I think, because for the speech to text I was relying on someone who's already done a lot of work on like setting this server up specifically for like home automation type stuff and all that, to the point where I can just kind of throw up a Docker container and then connect to it. There's nothing that's like quite that simple for text to speech. And like the models too, like that are more state of the art, I think, are that cross that sort of like threshold of quality that you would want for that kind of service, I guess, tend to be more like resource intensive. Like I remember trying to see like running Tortoise. I couldn't really do it without a GPU, I think, at least not without expecting, like unusable delays on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be good to get in, like, into hubs, or even just like as a general offering at some point.
Yeah, for the desktop browsers, I think that those web speech APIs, because that's all evergreen browser stuff, right? It's probably a good bet. I don't know what the Pico supports right now. VR chatters will know the best text to speech. But yeah, I think that it is one of those things where having the sort of hardware / OS vendor have something that's crazily optimized for their silicon is probably the best bet. So I don't know if the Pico has it enabled in their Chromium build. They might.
For text to speech, if they're hooking into like Android, if they have like the default things, then maybe, because I know that Meta doesn't for whatever reason.
Yeah, I know Meta. That's why I'm not mentioning them because they turn off a whole bunch of features from Chrome that. There's a question: why do they turn those things off? It's more effort to turn them off than it is to just have a functional browser. Right. But on Pico, like, there's a whole bunch of PWA features that just work because they don't turn them off explicitly in their build, which was super advantageous for the product that we're building. But I don't remember specifically about the web speech, if that's flipped on or not. But by default, I would imagine that it. Well, I don't know.
Text to speech, maybe.
I would imagine that it tries to use a cloud service and then falls back, maybe. But
yeah, because I know baseline Chrome uses like Google servers for their speech to text. So that's the reasoning why Quest browser doesn't have it in their Chromium, is because it's like Google's or something to that effect. I'm just going off what I vaguely remember Rick saying like years ago.
Yeah.
Discord.
Well, I actually just got my Meta Ray-Ban glasses and was using them this morning for the first time, and that obviously is using online for all of its speech recognition and stuff like that. The models aren't running on the phone for sure, so they must have those services capabilities within their sort of corporate, web services mesh. I don't know. Excuse me. So it would be cool if we get the left hand and the right hand to talk to each other on that. Because they obviously have the capability. And then of course, whoa, what's that? Are you laughing at the left hand and the right hand talking, Heather?
Yeah, sorry. That was agreeing. It's really frustrating that I can't actually articulate. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
No worries. No, that's okay. It would be fine to laugh. Yeah, I wonder. That would be really cool if they could figure that out. But also, doesn't the Quest have
like a voice command feature?
It does. Yeah, it does. So
only if you're in the U.S.
Oh, really?
I think it's disabled overseas.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's on board either, to be honest with you. I mean, it's pretty small models either way, but
especially if it's like
right now at the ASR leaderboard on Hugging Face, and the state of the art is from NVIDIA Canary. They also have Parakeet, and then it's Whisper, and there's one 0.6 billion, which is that'll fit in a gig of RAM. And running full speed without quantization or anything like that. So I mean, these things are getting quite reasonable now.
But what's your
all the time?
But what's your monthly data center costs?
If you're only going to text, then you're not really, the delay. You're not dealing with text, speech to text, back to speech again. So you have some flexibility with how your round trip times.
Yeah, I just wonder what the data center costs are for each one of those options that you listed. Like even for like, okay, there's a dozen people that will meet each day for a class. What's that workload? And like, so kind of what's the operating expenses?
But modal, there's a group now. I was just talking to a guy today. He's in the stable diffusion side of things and has got a grant from modal to do something with education. They're called, I don't know, something schools, AI for school or something like this. And they just got a pretty good package of credit from modal, which is a serverless spin it up on demand provider of GPU services, and there's quite a few of these guys, and especially now, you have that much VC money floating around, spending on hardware that the cost per, they usually put it down into tokens, but the cost per running these models is really dropping all the time, every day.
Yeah, but how much is it?
For hubs, you could probably get some kind of deal, frankly, especially if there's a charity component to it or a nonprofit component.
Yeah, but it's kind of like at the hackathon, right? They give us a bunch of AWS credits because once those run out, then we're hooked on their services. Anyway, so yeah, I'm curious, like, because if it used to be $5 million a month and now it's $1 million a month, yeah, the price is going down. But is that something you can absorb, like once your gravy train runs out of grants or of kind of a donated GPU time? But that's just me thinking operationally about these things, which is my own bias, basically.
Matt, quite often you used to say that you had investors standing by to do things if certain features were in hubs, but I can't remember what you used to say you were looking for.
Oh no, I didn't say I had investors standing by. No. No, what I said was like, back in 2021, I guess. The first hubs thing I joined, I was like just really super impressed. And I said it in the hubs Discord as well. And I saw a lot of other people say the same thing, where it's like, oh, this is the existence proof, where it's like all these open standards work, then they can all be integrated together.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Right? Because just because there's an open standard doesn't mean the drivers are mature. It doesn't mean that the implementations are mature, or that there's a good reference implementation in open source, right? But I was like, okay, there's an existence proof here that this is kind of beyond the germ stage. And I dove in pretty deep technically, and Dom and other people on the Hubs team were very transparent, which was awesome. And the what I originally thought was, okay, I can use Hubs as the technology basis for my product and WebXR as the basis for my product. And all of the hub stuff seemed to be gaps that were closable. There was definitely some conversations where, is it a heavily customized A-frame implementation that they have? Is that what it is?
Well, there's
the
BitECS client too that they've been doing. It started A-frame, but like there's been working for a while to like kind of move off of it, I think, into a custom 3 BitECS.
Yeah, and so after the initial kind of like shock and awe, like in a good way, of like, wow, this works and this is cool, when I got kind of more detail oriented, and I was like, why do you have forks of a bunch of these packages? And I'm not throwing shade on anybody. They're like, well, I got real detail oriented with them. And I was like, okay, so this is an existence proof, but you already know that you're going to have to, for 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, you have to change a bunch of fundamental stuff. And then so there was a conversation about, what can I do? Like, is there a public-private partnership that's possible there, or will Mozilla have to kind of get that first, kind of like basically do like figure a bunch of it all out internally, and then have like an opening gambit of 2.0 alpha 1 or whatever, and then we can kind of participate.
Right.
And so originally I was like, oh great, I can just use this hubs thing and then focus even more on just the product. And that was kind of the basis of the prototyping we did from December 2022 until March 2023, was we were building in React 3 Fiber. And there is a way to basically, there's some like, I forget what it's called, like a root element basically, or some root window handle or something in hubs that you could probably connect a React 3 Fiber app to, was Dom's assertion then. But kind of seeing like, okay, well, I don't know, just a bunch of little hitches with hubs, but really, and then the kind of like, well, can we fix this? Is it to fix, or is it hard to fix? There's actually a bunch of stuff that was not incremental fixes on top of what they had. It was let's do a 2.0. And then it was like, well, what's the time frame for that? And what's the kind of track record for on-time delivery for these things? Then also by March of 2023, and I'm going to say this and then I'll follow up real quick. WebXR on HoloLens stopped working, and it's still fucking broken. I've sold all my HoloLenses now because I'm just have zero confidence. It like gets worse and worse with every update. Quest had, I was tracking it for a while. It was kind of a critical regression every 5 to 6 weeks that they found out about, because the community would tell them, not their QA, not anything else, not their telemetry. And what else was there? I don't know. I was just like, and then I was thinking, okay, well, maybe we can take Wolvik and kind of have a sort of a Electron type wrapper for our application where we can kind of customize Wolvik. But really, it was like Wolvik in hubs, like, was a nightmare. Like it was not a good showing. And I was like, okay, if Mozilla's own browser in XR doesn't work with Mozilla's hubs in XR, I don't see to me, it was just too big of a gulf to try to absorb myself as a self-funded entrepreneur. And talking to investors, none of them care about open standards or whatever. In fact, that's kind of not what they want to hear about, right? They want to hear about proprietary moats where people like, you've got your own blockchain with NFTs where you lock people in. Like they're very much in the mindset of like, so the kind of what I would call the social media lock-in sort of tactics of legacy companies, which that's the right emoji for that. So none of them are really interested in that story of, well, how do we make a vibrant ecosystem that's more open, that will have those incumbents running scared. That's not what investors were interested in hearing about when it comes to XR in 2022, 2023. In this year, it's a little bit different. Inside baseball, because of zero interest rates kind of going away, a bunch of like the kind of bullshit VCs that were kind of working on easy mode over the last couple of years all kind of went away, and a bunch of the sort of more experienced venture capitalists that are still deploying capital want big visions like this, that are like, how do you get into open standards and put your thumb on the scale of open standards and be a thought leader, if you will. That does speak to some VCs now, but all the ones I've talked to are like, well, let's come back in 6 months after you've released your application and we'll talk. So there was nobody that was like, I love Mozilla, let me give you money. Well, there's maybe one or two people. There's maybe one or two people that were like I'll give you like $5,000. And even when you pay people minimum wage, that like doesn't really cover like 1 month of salary, which is $4,000 a month plus 50% load for taxes and stuff.
Right.
So the people that were seemingly interested, like couldn't even give us enough to like cover like 1 month of payroll for just 3 people. And so anyway, so I don't remember what I said when, but that's the full like lay of the land.
No, that's
And
good. Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting that you said March last year because this is my own opinion, and I'm not going to name who it is, but in May was one of the first significant, what I'll call hubs layoffs happened. And so I think what you were detecting probably was being detected to some degree inside of Mozilla as well.
Perhaps, yeah. And I've been shipping products in Silicon Valley for over 25 years, so I've got sometimes I have feelings about things that are hard to, or intuitions about things that are hard to verbalize, or I don't want to verbalize because I don't want to start rumors because it's based on pure instinct and not on facts or data. But like I don't know, yeah. So on the WebXR browser side, if I were to be self-critical, I actually spent way too much time recording videos, gathering profiles, gathering core dumps, and sending them to everyone I knew at Microsoft and everyone I could find at HTC and all this kind of stuff. I spent a lot of time doing my personal time doing that stuff instead of trying to have a better pitch deck or whatever else. So I think I was off balance on that. Someone was trying to say I don't give enough feedback, which is, I think, comical to anybody who actually knows me. But there's a lot of great progress. There's a lot of things to be kind of happy about. And the constraints that I operate within is not everybody else's constraints. But if Hubs kind of paid for itself in terms of stopping any shenanigans at kind of the W3C sort of level or at the kind of Kronos level, and it did its job, then I don't know, that's something to be 100% sad about. It might be bittersweet, but I think there's a sweetness aspect to it that we shouldn't forget about.
Slightly different question, and this is more for everybody because I don't understand this side of it, but what if we imagine from this point forward that the shutdown of hubs happens and for all intents and purposes the code gets locked in its 1.0 version of whatever that will be, and it stood its ground in open source while it did it, but it sort of gives birth to all this people forking, and it goes off into the world. Like M2's got a version and other people have versions and whatever. What is the forward-looking vista for how the code evolves after that point? I have a limited understanding that Mozilla has some licensing control. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested more in like the things about creativity or building new code or dreaming up a new idea or something like that. Like, is there a forward-looking vision for what Hubs was to become something else?
I think it would be interesting if Hubs, if there is something similar to, I guess, what Servo has, like a technical steering committee, to sort of like figure out, okay, in Hubs going forward, like, yeah, people will, be forking off Hubs and kind of doing their own things, but like, what should mainline Hubs be like? And what deciding, hopefully it would be like a very collaborative thing with the different Hubs owners, like readily, upstreaming things that they did on their own instance that they feel would be beneficial. to everyone, or even having certain hubs, people maybe like having theirs serving as a test bed for maybe proposed changes of this like hypothetical like technical steering committee.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be an interesting way to move forwards with. Of course, you'd need to figure out like leadership for that, and what kind of representation other folks would have, which I don't have too much experience kind of like directly interacting with. I've only ever kind of seen it in other organizations.
Does it have to be centralized? I don't understand if it has to be. Is it something that can
It's what other
evolve
people
out?
have done, right? So like Node.js and the Linux Foundation, like really like Linux Foundation now has like all these like little baby foundations sort of underneath it, where in terms of governance and whatever else is there's kind of some boilerplate templates for setting all that stuff up so that it doesn't fall into some of the I'd say sort of anti-patterns that other sort of open source kind of oriented foundations or attempts have kind of fallen into in the past, where it's like Firefox Reality and Wolvik. Yeah, I don't know that that's that doesn't solve the problem of how do you elect a board or a technical steering committee, who's going to be the treasurer if you have money going in and out. So Linux Foundation kind of did the Lord's good work in terms of commoditizing a lot of that structure and paperwork in a really great way. So there's probably other ways to go about it. But open source foundations in the past have had problems where there's like basically more or less one corporate sponsor, and then that corporate sponsor has a couple of bad business quarters, and then they kind of pull back, and then the foundation doesn't collapse, but it's not staffed. So then like a bunch of paperwork doesn't get done and kind of stuff like that. I do wonder, if like what does it say? It's so funny. I can't read this thing because it's out of focus, and every time I move my head, it shifts.
Oh no!
A lot of good case studies in the crypto ecosystem. I don't know anything about when you say crypto, you mean cryptocurrency, not cryptography, I assume. But I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. For managing protocols, open source projects, even like having roles and project management, bounties, payouts. It's really evolved a lot over the past few years. A lot of really good tools, easy to spin up, more friendlier to anon contributors than other kind of like models. But I don't know if that's like a good culture fit with hubs. So not sure how relevant that'd be.
It does occur to me that, there is like so there's the IEEE metaverse sort of standards thing, and then there's like I don't think it's OM. I think Open Metaverse Initiative, and then there's another Open Metaverse thing, or like two separate things, right?
Interoperability?
It's like
one of them is under the Linux Foundation, and it's a little bit rudderless last little while, apparently. But
it's like been quiet for like 6 months. I would say it's been leaderless since January.
Is that the one where it's like they have a YouTube channel where people from Epic and Pixar and whatever are doing videos like every month?
That's MSF.
Metaverse Standards Forum. Thank you. Yes. Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
They're cool, but they're not really like like I'm the chair of one of the working groups there, and it's looking for like sponsorships and whatnot. The governance structure there is way slower than one may think. A lot of still bureaucracy and whatnot. If you're trying to go for some kind of reference model, I don't think that would be the one to look at. I mean, it's good.
That's what Liam was telling me a couple of weeks ago. Also, he sits in on a lot of those meetings, and it's slow. But yeah, at AWE last year in Santa Clara, I asked Neil Trevitt. I was like, because they were doing a bunch of IEEE metaverse sort of evangelism there, and I was like, is there any kind of grants or anything for making open source reference implementations for some of these standards? Because like I'm willing to take on that overhead into my product development, if we get like literally payroll runway out of it, like, and it didn't seem like it. It really seemed like some of the players that are operating in that space aren't really super interested in.
It's frustrating because that's like what they kind of stated they would be like doing, like, like
Yeah,
things up. That was the whole purpose. And yeah, when it comes to like, rubber meeting the road, like, can we get some people testing out implementations, giving feedback on these things? It's
yeah, 100%. Yeah, and maybe I'm just not a very I don't know, convincing person to try to like do that to kind of bring that sort of together. But the impression that I get
you have a
is
proposal. I
that
mean, I feel like this kind of stuff also occurs in OMI. And it's like there's a lot of things that could be using more feedback and implementers. And I'm just thinking, okay, like if there was like a budget that can kind of show like uh, a case study of maybe a faster system for distributing grants, getting results, measuring impact,
yeah.
then that could be a great case study for some of these bigger orgs to see like what's working and what's not.
Totally. The impression that I get, which is not based on any information or data, is that I think that from NVIDIA's perspective, if it doesn't lead to a path to Omniverse, they aren't interested. And I think that there's some other vendors that have similar sort of
You'll see that everywhere. Aligning
metaverse service plays that it's the same deal where it's like, hey, if this doesn't lead to Horizon Worlds, then that's kind of not exactly what they want.
You just got to fine tune your proposal to align incentives with some of these groups, and how it can benefit stakeholders in that way.
Yeah, I guess so. I think until the Federal Trade Commission like comes and starts beating up some of these vendors, will they kind of will some of this stuff shake loose? And we saw the same stuff with web stuff in the late 90s. Anyway, but my assumption for now is that we just have to ship a product and get it selling to the right kinds of people, and then we can sort of against like everybody tells me like revenue is its own funding. So just getting a product out there and start selling it to customers and getting POCs going is the way to get this stuff done, the good old-fashioned way. Heather,
I'll read it out loud. I've been an IEEE
Okay.
member that I just left, and I can say that plenty of folks there are motivated by tenure. So they just want publications. So yeah, it's aligned with everything you guys have said, right? If there isn't some form of benefit or dollar sign at the end of it, they're not interested.
Yeah, and that's a bummer. But having been through this before with other standard stuff, there's especially in a down economy or the anticipation of a down economy, people start to batten down the hatches on their business and try to like dig a moat, and that doesn't really work well with standards. And so you just have to kind of be patient. And and some of these individuals who work for some of these companies may themselves be as frustrated as we are, right? And so it's kind of like, well, you just have to wait for the upswing to come back when people aren't being defensive or on the back foot about their business in an existential way.
Yeah. And I will say the slowness, the plus side of the slowness is they don't want to make a mistake. That's what's going on, you know. And
It's important to, but that's also part of the thing. It's like, well, wouldn't like having grants for making reference implementations before you ratify the thing help de-risk that?
helpful, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
de-risk that. And it's like, but if they don't have the cash, they don't have the cash. You know, if
Right.
the cash is spent purely on administrative stuff, which is not a, you know, if you didn't have someone coordinating it all, but then you did give grants, how would you bring it all together so that you could tell the world about it? So it's not an easy position for anybody, probably.
Right.
Individually.
No time to do it right, always time to do it over.
Oh wow.
It's a bad business maneuver, but you see it everywhere, right? Just get it out the door, and then we'll fix it later.
Nothing
Yeah, or I
else
think
is a temporary solution.
Yes. Yep.
or what was the thing from the movie Contact? You know, why build one when you could build two for twice the price? Yeah, I forget what it was. There was some engineering adage in like the mid to late 90s about kind of build one that you plan to throw away, that you kind of learn all your lessons from. You know, like don't plan on like your 1.0 being the thing you build on for 10 years. And that was like some advice somewhere in some book that I read that was kind of widely held sort of advice. But like then people started to realize that no, everything you build is the 10-year thing. So just you have to put all the rigor sort of into it and try to make it as flexible as you can, sort of incrementally, instead of planning for the big bang rewrite that will suddenly sort of make things better.
Does happen.
But you know, like what M sub 2 was saying about the rendering thing for the speech bubbles, extracting that out to a web worker. You know, there's probably a lot of incremental things that can be done to solve like a lot of the rough edges that we see. You know, I know there's been a bunch of Blender integrations for hubs. That's been a big like thing I see them like talking about all the time.
Yeah.
But like is there one for Figma as well for developing like in like I'd say application specific UI within hubs, not hubs UI necessarily, but that kind of thing. Like that's something Bezier is doing, like is having a back and forth between Figma. So regular UI designers who have an established workflow have an on-ramp, you know.
That would have been cool.
I mean, it's still doable.
That would have been great ideas.
I mean, shit, that's not a like that. Here's a dumb idea. Like, what are there any Bezier people here? Bezier closed a pretty beefy A round. Someone who's friendly with them could go and say like, hey, you know, would you spend this amount of money to make a thing you can export from Bezier into hubs? In terms of like a marketing expense, if nothing else, or a white paper, there's a greater than zero chance that they could be.
They just did it. I think they're beta testing it still right now.
Well, I know that they did it for Figma, for Figma, for instance, as well. Nothing. No, Bezier, Bezi.
Oh, Bezier, that's right.
Bezier, sorry. Something else about these speech bubbles, they cut off the bottom of the font, so there's sometimes where I cannot the Y's look like a V. Yeah, Bezier, formerly Bezel.
Oh yeah. That used to happen with spawn chat things too.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I see the little chat things spawn in front of me. Yeah, and it's cut off. It might be a billboarding problem with the text, or it could be a layout thing. I don't know.
probably when it,
lot of rough edges.
Yeah.
That no one has taken the time to polish.
Yeah.
I mean, like there is something interesting about, like I talked about, like we were developing a Rack 3 fiber application outside of hubs, but it was like, do we have an on-ramp into hubs for multi-user part of that application? And it seemed like there was that thing, and I know that one of the challenges that was articulated to me, a few months ago with hubs was everyone who's using it for ongoing, relatively serious sort of work, scooch back, for ongoing sort of relatively serious sort of work ends up forking it and modifying it as opposed to, putting things upstream or whatever else. So, I do wonder, like, for an independent foundation, if you had a, at PlayStation, we called them mini apps. And then I took that same sort of architecture over to the Roblox application as well. When I was at Roblox, where it's like chat is a mini app and the friends list is a mini app and the,
very modularized.
Yeah. But making it so that each one of those applications could be independently deployed. And have their own over-the-air update schedule, their own A/B experiment schedule, not be coupled to each other. I wonder that plugins are in development. Oh, cool. Yeah, so I wonder, like, could you do an add-ons marketplace where if people want to give stuff away for free, they can, but the foundation kind of handles all the sort of transactional back end of that and takes whatever Epic takes, is it 8% or whatever off the top, and then that funds the foundation. That might be interesting. Like an interesting way to monetize hubs as it currently stands without having to do a big bang sort of change to anything necessarily. That's one of, again, revenue is its own funding sort of thing. Anyway, those are some ideas. Bezzy doing an export into hubs and paying someone to develop that or document it or sort of whatever. Coming up with a marketplace, which I'd have to think in terms of Mozilla, kind of asking them, like, because they already have that for browser add-ons for Firefox. I can't imagine that the marketplace UI or the ratings or a bunch of the security and spam defenses around it, if it, like, how much of that is open source can just be lifted and shifted over in terms of same REST APIs, same backends. I don't know.
I don't know. I would guess it's not easy because one of the first things I asked the developer who is making the plugin system, Manuel, was about, well, why aren't you doing it in like Mozilla's add-on store? Like, this is already a solved problem. Why are you farming it out to NPM and making it node modules? And it was just kind of, I got the impression that it was going to be much easier for right now to do the node modules than set up the store stuff. So I would wager that's a big lift.
Well, I think also with node modules, node modules aren't always pure JavaScript. Sometimes they compile C or C++ or Rust code, for that matter, to whatever platform you're installing them on, right? And so that's not something you could probably easily do in a browser add-on marketplace type situation. So I would imagine there's some element of that to why they made that choice on the server side. But on the client side, why, like, going pure JS purely on the client for a marketplace limits what you can do. But is there enough possibilities in terms of breadth and depth, to have a meaningfully diverse set of content. And not just rooms and avatars, but I mean like data-driven applications.
Well, I kind of thought that the hub client was all JavaScript and TypeScript.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that for the NPM part of that, I wonder if it's so on the server side, they can like compile stuff.
Well, these are client-side plugins, not Reticulum server-side.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, I don't
no
know.
worries.
Yeah, it might have been literally expediency because they might have known that they had a limited runway. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, probably good for what happens, that it was just quick and easy. Still hope that'll land before the shutoff date, but yeah.
You know, like thinking about it like super technically, I mean, like let's say you want to have two applications in the same hub space. There are frameworks like React, for instance. Hub doesn't support ALTF.
GLTF.
Instance. Oh, GLTF. Sorry, on mine the font is cut off, so like.
Yeah, no, it's probably not taking like line height or something into account when it's rendering the texture.
Yeah. So there are some frameworks like React, for instance, where if you have two different versions of it running within the same sort of like JS sort of context, or same JavaScript VM or the same window instance or whatever else, the worst part about it is that it doesn't fail immediately. It just, things get weird after a while, and it's impossible to debug why. So I wonder if the NPM approach kind of allowed them to look at all the plugins you were installing and deduplicate packages if possible, or tell you that there's a conflict. And that not only kind of allows them to reduce the amount of RAM being used in terms of you don't have like 5 copies of React or 5 copies of GraphQL or something across because of the plugins you have installed. I wonder if that was part of what they were trying to accomplish. We did a similar thing with React Native on PlayStation, and we used a Webpack feature called Module Federation, or it got renamed to Module Federation at some point, so that each one of the mini apps didn't have their own copy of GraphQL or of React or whatever. And that was actually a tricky bit of engineering in 2018 because we were super detail oriented. So anyway, I wonder if that's why they did that for the client side plugins. And that would actually be a very legit reason to have this complication / wrinkle. But NPM itself, I don't know how much of it is native versus pure JavaScript, or Yarn, which is a NPM competitor, or Bun, which is another competitor. But they all operate on the same standards. So I wonder if one of those could actually just be hoisted into the client. It's kind of heavy, but then it's there in the client, and you just have to put a UI around it. So I wonder if that's what they were thinking there. That would, if that's what they were thinking, then that's super legit. Versus if you like, okay, you can only have one plugin per hub space, then you don't need to think about that problem space at all.
Supposed to be multi-plugin. Actually, several was the reference implementation is going to have a couple different plugins, I think. But yeah, might be good questions to ask at the next development meeting, which should be Tuesday at noon Eastern time.
Sorry.
Theoretically.
Oh, sorry. You go first, Imaginary.
Yeah, sorry. I'm done now.
Oh, okay. I was because I was about to kind of like tangent a bit, but I was curious if anyone here who is more familiar with behavior graph in hubs could kind of like, I guess, describe what the state of that is in. It's something that I've seen like talked about when I look at like hubs every now and again, but I don't fully know like what state it's in. I know it's supposed to be like a kind of node based. It's like node based scripting, right?
Yeah, basically. Um, do you know Unity's blueprints at all?
Um.
Or Unreal blueprints, you mean?
Oh,
Yeah. I know Unreal Blueprints.
yeah. Okay. It's a very similar system to that. Basically, yeah, it's node-based scripting, and so like there are logic nodes and flow control nodes, event loop type stuff, um, and um, then you can change component specific properties. Um, the status
Mm-hmm.
is currently it's being refactored to be one of these plugins, and that's going to be the main reference plugin, I think. And so it's that'll be good for getting it into a main release. Um, it's the system itself. Um, it's uh, fairly it's fairly well designed at the moment. There's a lot missing from it, so I'd still put it in an early alpha state. And there are a couple questions on workflows, like whether you should actually be allowed scene graphs or just because a lot of things have shifted where best practices seems to not be to use them anymore, and there are probably still going to be some tweaks to how things work. I mean, obviously not before the shutdown of Mozilla's handling of it, but as it continues developing, um, it should it should be relatively the same, but still a bit unstable. I'm confident enough that most people should be able to play around with it and have it work for the most part. There may still be some breakage, but having it as a plugin that you turn on, I think will be really nice. So that's kind of its state.
How do you interface with it exactly? Is it like solely like a separate kind of flat 2D thing? Is it something you can interact with in VR?
Okay, it is solely a flat 2D thing. It's baked into the GLB, the scene or avatar if you put it on an avatar. Currently, the only way is to define it in a custom node editor in Blender. Eventually, I would like to see a node editor added to Spoke that could work with it, because there are some libraries for that. But as for in scene, there's nothing currently planned for that. After things get more settled, I think that might be an interesting idea to pursue, though.
Yeah, because just seeing like visual scripting stuff, it reminds me of like what I've seen in like Neos VR, where they have like a complete sort of like visual scripting thing that you can do in VR that like updates your environment live. I think like we haven't seen, I think, like an extensive prototype of that in WebXR yet, and I think that would just be really cool.
Yeah, as I say, not in WebXR, but PS4 Dreams on PS4, PS5. You can do creation in the XR mode, in the PSVR mode, and it's fucking awesome. it's like super duper amazing. Um,
Yeah, not sure how that would work, but I would be very interested in people coming and trying to make that
Oh yeah,
work.
that was my
Find out.
the other question I had was like, what level of control does the scripting give you exactly?
Um, it should give you some. It, eventually, it should give you pretty much full control. Currently, it gives you mm, a fair amount of control. Like we have successfully made games in
Hmm.
with behavior graphs for hubs. Jim and I, we've made a couple games for it, and they're, Jim more than I have, but they've been really nice with some really nice effects. Currently, not all the components are exposed. Um, it as far as I know, there's no real technical limitations from stopping anything, or
Hmm.
stopping you from doing anything. It just not everything has been implemented yet.
I see.
Like
Mhm.
we do have a change hub node that got added recently. Um, the oh, we got physics changing stuff, like you could turn on and off physics,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
so that was a nice thing. Um, there, as I said, there it should you should be able to do anything with behavior graphs, pretty much.
Hmm.
Um,
Is there any I know someone mentioned that there's videos on it already. Is there any like written docs anywhere as well, or?
um,
That that was one of the. Do you want me to take that, Imaginer? Or
sure.
that's one of the shocking problems with the layoffs is that Jim Conrad was writing that documentation the
Mm.
day he was laid off. So
Oof.
where did it go? Who owns it? Is Mozilla even going to release it now?
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know. Find Jim Conrad and like buy him 3 beers. I bet you could get him to recreate it.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Um, I suppose I'm not sure what exactly Spatial has that you're referring to.
Yeah, I've only ever visited
Um,
Spatial a couple
yeah,
times.
Spatial. I just went on it today to see what it became, and they must have made something like a switch, like a pivot, so you can build games, which are built on top Unity with an SDK. Usually, formerly, Spatial was simply also just a WebXR room-based VR environment.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hubs should be able to do that. It's yeah. I mean, it's still in the early stages, but I would not be surprised seeing lots of games being created on hubs with behavior graphs. 'Cause, I mean, once you add in interactivity, people just naturally translate to that. Now, it being all WebVR and or WebXR and node based, the complexity of the games, I'm not sure it's probably not going to be as performant as Unity, something Unity based, but um, functionality wise, probably you'll probably be able to get similar results.
Uh, I would like to shed some more lights on this because personally, from where I started, I actually started with spatial and then I came to hubs basically. But I was from a background, so I really believed in the web, not with something with the Unity to web pipeline. So, uh, although my aim is to actually make hubs more of like spatial
Hey, I
or
saw your
even
chat.
better
If you
than
come
that.
into the group, you can speak up in the group.
Uh, okay, am I
And
audible now?
more people are more likely
Yeah,
to answer.
you're audible.
Okay, so as I was saying that few things that spatial has but hubs doesn't. So we are on that way with behavior graph. Like with behavior graph, we'll have all those functionalities, and the best part about hubs is that like if you could at 100% of time that any GLP that you export that would directly work with hubs. Like you don't have to be suspicious, like with Unity if you create some light baking and all sorts of things, you are still suspicious whether it will be working directly on the web or uh, not. I mean really. So with the GLTF part, like the GLB that you export from Blender and you bring it into hubs, it's a sure thing that it will be working. So that pipeline is very much clear. What I think is, bye Jimmy.
See you, Jimmy.
So
Oh,
uh,
bye.
one thing what I feel with spatial has is
Thanks,
the
guys. Be
physics
well, everybody.
movement. Cool. But we are here restricted with the nav mesh. Although I believe that Imaginer has different views on it, and there are several others who believe that nav mesh is the best way for navigation. Uh, although, like, I feel that the way the jumping and all those things that you have, which is definitely possible in nav mesh as well. Like it is possible here, but uh, the way that most of other platforms like you all guys might know about third room, which is also from uh, which has evolved of someone from the hubs team. So they have also preferred physics based movement and uh, like that is the way that they have approached, although the other structures have been inspired a lot from hubs. And because the person who has built this actually is very known in the hubs Discord, and I cannot recall, but yeah, that's a very great thing. And Matrix is something what Mozilla chat is based on, so that is also very trustworthy kind of thing. So yeah, I have recently worked on. Yes, exactly. Physics also we now have it in hubs with the behavior graph. There are so many things that are grabbable, and I have recently worked on something where you could create 2D websites or whatever you would like, and you could bring them in as iframes and uh, so that you don't have to work directly on the hub's code base. Rather, you just have to work on your own website, your own place, and you take them up in hubs, you integrate them, and you do certain events that you want to do. Like for example, on click of a 3D button you want to open a registration form or a login form, or maybe for a simpler use case you just want to open a product uh, description thing, where suppose like clicking on this cube or bedsheet or whatever it is, you click on this and you get a product description of what this is about, what would be the cost and stuff. You click on the buttons, the payment gateway opens in the 3D, actually 2D model itself, without leaving hub's website, like on the same page. And you pay it, you get it, and you continue your further experience. Like you could explore some other things and uh, keep working. So that is what I've been able to make some progress on it, and I'm looking forward to uh, make it a bit more robust and contribute it as a part of pull request so that others can also take that forward and make use of that. If you want to have more information of how that is actually being approached on, you might be interested in knowing about the add-ons which recently uh, which was also part of Hub's roadmap, so that we could have a community marketplace sort of thing where everyone could have their simple pieces of code, and you could integrate it directly with your main hub's code just by modifying a few lines here and there. So like you don't have to always modify your main part of code, but always take like smaller pieces of code, just like you have your npm js registry or things like that where you have
Mhm.
several modules, and you take that up. So that was also like the very saddening part for us was that we were all very excited on that particular day, and many people signed up for the meetings knowing that today the add-ons thing are going to be announced. We are very excited to see how those things are going to be implemented, but the meeting never happened. I mean it happened, but on that day it didn't happen, and we actually got lost with the news of sunset. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I was just wondering, since Hub's probably the main authoring tool of Hub's content is Blender, whether the Blender Foundation simply could integrate Hubs.
Hmm.
I don't see that happening.
I think Blender's been asking for money lately, a lot.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is?
and they are focused on their own tool, and they don't really have the resources to take on hubs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But there might be a little bit of mutual admiration from both camps. I think that's possible. Blender doesn't really serve the same market that Hubs does, though. So
Mhm.
they're a little.
and also judging by some of Ton's keynotes, like the one for the Wonder Conference either last year or the year before, they're not all that um, into metaverses. They're somewhat anti-metaverse.
Oh my God! Next, they're
It's
probably going to announce they're
understandable.
into AI. Whoa, sorry.
It's a loaded word now. Like it's
Yeah, Blender.
yeah. Has anybody like come up with like a very finite list of things to specifically kind of ask the kind of Mozilla senior management about? Like it sounds like there's a couple
Yeah.
of these like dangling threads. Have they been kind of collated into one very concise thing that have just like a yes no answer in terms of can we get access to this? Yes, no.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
this going to be MPL licensed? Yes, no.
Right. We're really close to that, Matt. We think we're hopefully. I mean, we have a governance team. What we want to do is approach them as a team. So
Mhm.
not one person. It'll be probably I hope 5 or 6 people from the community,
Okay.
and we'll approach them. And then and I'd like them to. My personal ask is that I'd like them to decide this week. I don't want to give them long because they've had ages to think about this decision themselves. And also, we've had about 2 weeks to work on it as the community, and we've been doing it publicly in front of them. They can see our meeting notes. They can see us talking in Discord. So really, the things we're bringing up are just things echoed out of the community. So they shouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised when we.
But I mean, there's a bunch of like non a bunch of internal company logistics as well as part of this change that are probably, I would imagine, take up a lot of their intellectual oxygen. You know, I would assume that they aren't glued to their Discord screens reading stuff. They're probably trying to figure out how to replace people within Mozilla or give people a soft landing or deal with international labor laws and all this. Because I think one of the cool things about Mozilla is that they were like kind of remote first way back when, but as much as remote first is like this really cool thing, it does have administrative overhead that makes this kind of thing even more challenging. So I would assume that there's like just a bunch of legal and HR stuff that they have to deal with. And
I think they sent it to a very small team, Matt. Right? I think it's just a couple of people are minding the store, so to speak. I don't know if there's any. I think for me, this is just me speaking personally. I think Mozilla realized that it stepped in it with the layoffs and that it joined the Fangboy Club of, now being one of those big ugly tech giants that's turned its back on a little bit of its original mission and has done layoffs just as much as anybody else does layoffs. And so I think they want, like they said in their memo, they're looking for a graceful exit for this plan. So said another way, Mozilla wants their reputation beautifully intact at the end of this. Where Hubs ends up, I don't think they care.
Nope.
Which is interesting, if I may point out, in the list of things that we are sketching up together that we may ask for, ironically, if you set aside the concept of value, like just set that aside for a second, there's only one item we've actually put on the list that costs money. Everything else doesn't even cost any money. Like, yes, could we have keys to the code? Yes, we'd like that. Could we have the duck? Could we have the name?
Right.
Could we have the MPL license replaced with a more generous license and granted to us?
Right.
None of those items cost money, actually.
Well, I mean, but like licensing stuff is like internal legal counsel or possibly external if they don't have it internally anymore, right? That becomes
legal
like
counsel is the only thing we put on the list that does cost money, and we are going to ask them about that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, but I don't know, like I just be careful, like when you say like they, like, does they include Matt Cool? Does it include, these other people that were just as bummed and they're in a hard spot and trying to kind of figure it out? And I think that the other thing to kind of think about is, in 1999, I want to say, or 1998, when like Netscape was like imploding, right? And they open sourced like the Netscape browser, and Mozilla got founded in the first place. I didn't know you could make pallets of it. That's cool. Can you make this cocaine instead? I don't do cocaine, just for jokes. There was a whole bunch of people that said it was really before open source seemed to firmly, have taken over the entire software planet, basically. And everybody at that time said Netscape is dead. They're just trying to do something that's a fad, e.g. open source, that's popular, so that they'll somehow remain relevant. And people said the same thing when they came out with the VR browser. They're like, oh, well, Mozilla like shut down Thunderbird so they could focus on this other quote unquote fad. So that narrative keeps getting repeated. But the thing I think that I wouldn't take for granted is that, Mozilla has their for-profit and non-profit sort of situation, but they're still around after, where are we, 2020? Is it 25 years? Is it actually 25 years? Am I that fucking old? Jesus Christ. For a really long time. And, like I remember like when I was working at the Sundance Film Festival, they had some lean years off and on also, depending on what financial status some of their donors and other people sort of had in that given year. And they had to make really hard decisions about how to continue to exist. It does become sort of existential, right? And so I think that in the same way that a lot of the Thunderbird enthusiast community were super had a lot of mixed feelings about it. Metaverse term is not got mutilated. Whoa. The performance of the client on this Pico 4 is going haywire.
Well, it's because the chat messages are coming in.
Because of the bubbles.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would just, when you say the like collective they, if you aren't being really precise about who you're including and excluding, you might be hurting someone's feelings who feels the same way that you do, right? And is trying to do their best within the constraints of things. But also, I think like if Mozilla hadn't been super prudent, I'm not defending Mozilla, like everything that they would ever do ever, but I think that when they know how to weather these cycles in the kind of global economy and what the ramifications of those are as a nonprofit or as a company that gets their operating funds from a very limited number of places. That's a really hard fucking job. It's not a job I would necessarily want to have.
Oh yeah.
And so I think having some empathy for how difficult that is.
Oh sure.
Is key, and using generalities like they in a pejorative context. I just think it's something to be careful about.
Right. To be clear, I'm speaking personally. This is Heather speaking for Heather, and I'm
Sure.
speaking in what I consider to be a professional but casual situation. I don't
Totally fair.
by anybody here. Yeah.
Totally fair.
Yeah, and I get what you mean, though. I mean, like for example, I don't know how much you ran into Michael Moran, but he basically took Matt Cool's place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Michael, it's been obvious Michael has been hauling, the company line, and he's been trying so hard, and he feels the conflict within himself.
Absolutely. Right. He's
is
also earlier in his
laid
career
off.
than Matt
He's
is.
now
Yeah.
literally shutting down the store. So he's got a tough road to hoe, and I do feel for him as a human being. But my feelings about Michael are separate from how I feel about what Mozilla has done.
Totally fair. Totally fair. And I'm sorry if I was sounding accusatory. I just wanted to, for the general group,
you're fine.
like discuss how to it's not a happy time, but like there's with Mozilla as an entity, I've seen this happen a few times over the course of Mozilla's history, like with Thunderbird and stuff like that. And that was all in IRC and not in hubs, obviously. But people were, it's like how do you keep this thing that has done so much good for open source, open standards, kind of pioneering like a remote first workplace, which has its own set of overheads, right? Which you could have had a lower set of overhead if you'd kept people local in the Bay Area for longer, for instance. And it's like on balance, would you rather have them around longer or have this one project be funded for longer? And I think that zooming out a bit, I think most people would rather them be around for longer and kind of adapt the kind of overarching mission. But also in terms of thinking about a lot of things with AI and like what is it being trained on? How do you get bias out of the data it's being trained on? Like I think that in the same way there was a gold rush around VR 5 years ago, kind of being there as like a voice of kind of longer-term ethics oriented voice in the same situation, I think is important. Are they adhering to their mission though? I don't imagine, or can you extrapolate?
Well, what I've noticed from Mozilla is, on the one hand, they have like their privacy reports and stuff. That's good, but on the other hand, they've made a lot of mistakes in the past and haven't really seemed to learn from them. From what I've seen interfacing with the Hubs team, they don't really have much in place to teach the people they hire about how to be good open source stuff, contributors, and their main source of funding comes from Google, and all basically all their attempts to diversify that have completely fizzled. So it now this is just total speculation, but it kind of makes me wonder how trustworthy Mozilla can be, especially since they went through a big leadership change like 10-ish years ago. Um, like it kind of when it gets down to it, if you follow the money and it leads back to Google. So I just wonder how much influence Google may have over them.
I don't.
Especially
Yeah.
given that if you look at their mission statement, Hub seems to align perfectly with it, and AI seems to be very questionable to it.
hmm But I mean, if you look at Google having layoffs of thousands and thousands of people, uh, uh, I- and I'm formulating this thought right now, so I'm just riffing here with you. You know, if you look at like, okay, they're laying off thousands of people, what's the likelihood of that kind of redirection deal continuing to be as sweet as it once was? But also looking at diversifying things like right now, for instance,
No, don't leave.
That'll teach you, Matt.
Middle of a thought.
Oh no.
Oh, Matt.
Well,
Oh,
He just
no,
got like
does his headset die?
maybe
I
he
don't
just got
know.
like blasted backwards. Yeah, his
Well, Matt.
hands and his thing. I think he dropped out.
Yes.
Unfortunate.
Oh no.
Oh, that was funny the way he said, "Oh no," just famous last word.
On the other hand, let's
Oh,
hope
back to you,
that's
Imaginary. Yes.
real life. 'Cause, yeah.
Yeah, and good points, Rithik. Yeah, with behavior graphs coming along, I noted that one, and I'm an outsider to understanding all this, and I was like, Frame was exactly at the moment at also bringing in behavior graphs. They suddenly Hubs was shoulder to shoulder with Frame, which was something that hadn't been true for quite some time, and it was like, you know, the underdog's coming up in the market, and then it's like, bam, shut down.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Hubs team did know it was shutting down. Apparently, they knew it was shutting down from us back in September. So, and that's been disclosed. I'm not giving out secret information. That's been disclosed that they knew it was going to shut down. They just didn't know when. But because at that point we'd already lost Dom, we'd already lost Elgin. I forget who else. Christian was gone by then. Well, Christian was just going at that moment.
Another thing that kind of strengthens my position on my feelings with Mozilla. Unfortunately, Matt isn't here, but I've talked a lot to the Hubs team, and a lot of the times when I've been talking to them, I've gotten what felt to be like a line I was being fed. That
Oh.
Yeah, it was kind of like I hear what you're saying, but nothing's really gonna change, and there's nothing I can do. I've I've just felt this kind of corporate line being spouted from Matt and Michael and stuff, and it's I mean, and like with things like with the layoffs of people, they never publicized any of the layoffs of people. Except for a couple, like unless they specifically announced themselves in Discord, you didn't hear about anyone getting laid off. Really,
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of the major ones you did, like Elgin, I think. Um, but others like Christian, he just disappeared. Liv also disappeared. Robin disappeared. And it was just like, oh yeah, they left. And so
Takahiro. Yep.
yeah, well, I mean, he announced it, but
Yeah, but he was ironically in meetings doing work at 10 or 11 that morning, and by noon, done.
Sorry about that. My Pico ran out of battery.
Oh, that's what we figured, Matt.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
It's kind of how your
You were
avatar just like
saying-
blasted backwards against a wall when that happened.
yeah, it was
Oh, no.
somewhat disturbing.
Sorry, I don't know why that happened, but it wasn't intentional. It gave me the 20% warning, and I was so involved in the conversation, I forgot about it.
You're okay.
But in terms of
Google
like
and people. Yeah.
yeah, in terms of like diversifying where they get their money from, and I can tell you this as someone who has been applying for NSF, Small Business Innovation Research grants. There's a huge appetite from the NSF right now for things like ethical AI. This is a thing that the National Science Foundation is explicitly worried about. And they also know that there's a lot of VC money going into maybe unethical uses of AI. And then on top of that, you've got other things like Epic mega grants and sort of things like that. Epic, it probably isn't as significant because those top out at 500K, at least for the public Epic mega grants thing. So, so in terms of diversifying where they can get sort of effectively public funds that are relatively free and clear of like no entanglements or that kind of stuff, probably, again, this is pure hyperbole from my very, very limited point of view. AI is where there's things where you can get things from the International Monetary Fund and you can get things from the National Science Foundation and that sort of stuff. So it's possible that they're trying to solve that Google problem as well by looking at Google having layoffs and assuming like, okay, when they go to re-up the deal, there may not be a deal, but also B, that deal may not be as
That's a good point.
profitable as it might have once been. Again, pure hyperbole, like the other point of view on this probably, but I can tell you like right now for NSF SBIR grants, they are by all means anybody like go try to snag one of these things because they've actually extended the deadline for this cohort of SBIR grants 3 times now, because they really, really want to get a lot of they want to tip the scales on basically how public AI and open source AI is going to play out. They're really worried that Microsoft with Azure and Meta with their data centers and Amazon with their data centers are going to tip the scales on this early market in a way that is not good for society at large, basically. And so they're really gathering as many small businesses that are kind of going in a different direction with ethical AI. So kind of using that, and just kind of extrapolating, again, pure hyperbole on my part, I would assume that that's probably the best way for Mozilla to diversify their sort of funds from public sources, public in the United States and also public in terms of international stuff as well. But again, that's pure hyperbole on my part.
Yeah,
right.
Could be.
Yep.
But Mozilla also has a for-profit corporation in it, so they can definitely be selling stuff and diversifying that way. they can be doing stuff that way, and also they can be doing they could be adding in more donations, which we found out from Matt and the team that like half the world can't give them money. So there
And there was
are
also
those.
that great Thunderbird video where they talked about Thunderbird's totally independent from Mozilla, and what was it, 7 million a year or something that they get by prompting people for donations like twice a year or something.
Yeah, notice how Thunderbird was recently taken over by Mozilla last year. Again.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
The 115 version. They decided that the team that was doing it wasn't being cross-platform and wasn't being professional enough, so we're just gonna retake it over, and that's how we got Thunderbird 115.
I did not realize that. I'm not, yeah.
And you notice they also changed the logo to be in line with their other logos and their branding, so they updated the branding. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's been taken over, and I would not be surprised if it got retaken over because it was making so much money and Mozilla wanted a part of that.
Yeah, I mean
that's just speculation on my part, but
but like thinking about like, you know, if you have 100 employees internationally, you know, in the same way, like earlier in this, I was talking about how like there were like WebXR enthusiasts that like came to me and was like, oh, I'll give you $5,000. And I'm like, that does not, thank you, I'm grateful, but that doesn't move the needle for me. For like a 100-person or even a 50-person organization, $7 million does not particularly move the needle. And so $7 million like a year, especially for an international thing where you've got people in Canada and people in the UK and people, you know, all over by being kind of 100% remote. So I don't know that if it's 70 million, then you're talking. Then you're like, oh yeah, that might be a reasonable sort of motivation for them to sort of take things over. I didn't know Thunderbird wasn't cross-platform after it got exited out of Mozilla. I didn't realize that.
It is cross-platform. It just, the feature set kind of diverged. It wasn't unified across all the platforms.
I see.
I still don't think that's fixed. Mostly, I think the update was a UI update that they wanted to push, but I'm not super familiar with it yet.
I like Thunderbird was my daily email driver for like 7 years probably, and the Mozilla offices were like literally a block and a half away from my house in Mountain View when I was living in Mountain View back then in the mid 2000s, like 2005 to 2011 or so. So I was a big fan, except for a couple of very critical bugs that were hard to reproduce that made me have to switch. And Gmail was like good enough at that point. So I haven't been sort of keeping up to date. I kind of remembered that it had gotten spun out during one of kind of Mozilla's contractions in its workforce when it had layoffs. But yeah, I can't imagine 7 million a year would have been a sole reason for it to
no,
you know, try to bring it in.
It could have also been, well, it probably was a lot of things, but I mean, if you look at one of the things they were this got posted in the Joint Forces channel in the Hub's Discord about how they got all their funding, and like since like it got very little funding when it first spun off from Mozilla, and I think in about 2017, and now it's just the amount of funding it's got has skyrocketed.
Mhm.
So um, I think Mozilla wanted to, at the very least, restake their claim on Thunderbird and go, no, this is ours, because it was doing so well.
Well, I also wonder, there's a bunch of how does the sausage get made sort of stuff that we don't have visibility into. I
Mhm.
wonder if basically the Mozilla leadership knows that kind of culturally there's just limitations about what that organization can do. You know what I mean? And that you have to kind of like cut something loose so it can actually grow because of how the finances are governed or whatever policies or just or cultural things. Um,
It could be, but as I was saying when you your Pico died, I continued on with things a bit. I've had interactions with um, a lot of interactions with the Hubs team, and so I got a little of the sense of how the sausage got made, and things smelled off. It,
I mean, laugh, cry, laugh, cry, laugh, cry.
things
Sorry.
smelled. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I still thought the Hubs team themselves definitely wanted to do stuff. Were like had the best interests in at heart, because and so that's why I stayed working with them. But the actions that I saw them taking, and from the conversations I had, it did not look good. And like a couple times I specifically asked Matt, like, okay, should we be preparing for an alt space? And he said, no, we're not there yet, and like we'll tell you if that ever gets to happen. And then we find out that it just comes up all of a sudden, and then we found out that, as Heather said, oh, they'd known since September. So that just doesn't look too good.
Yeah, I was having some private conversations with Takahiro, and he told me that he was moving back to Japan, and I'm like, oh, okay. We were discussing me paying him to do some updates to the immersive web emulator, the non-meta one, because of reasons. And and he's like, "Oh, I'm moving back to Japan, so we'll have to figure out how to do the payments once I'm reestablished in Japan." And I was like, "Okay, like, well, it's great that you work for a company, that allows you to relocate like that." And he didn't say something specific, but he kind of like he said something vague that was like indicated that he wasn't sure how much longer he would be employed for. So it seemed like people got a whiff of it early on. How much concrete information they had or didn't have isn't clear to me. But at the very least, he knew that the time was coming to an end, and he, for some reason, didn't want to wait around for the package, which is always an interesting choice.
Yeah. Hey all, I have to go for the night, but I'll actually be heading over to another Hubs event that is actually later tonight. This is another person, not just M2, got Community Edition up and running, but so did Yvonne get Community Edition up and running. And she does Animation Nights New York, which is hosted in Hubs tonight. So that's an animation festival, an independent animation festival. Yeah, really cool. Another great example of something people have done with Hubs. That's tonight. So I'll be back at 8 p.m. over there. And of course it's an animation event, so you have to watch films before you show up because there's a quiz. Just kidding. There's no quiz. Okay. Hey, M2, thanks for making us feel so welcome, and thanks, Matt, in particular to you for answering my questions. I feel like I got a free consult. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I enjoyed the
And,
conversation.
Yeah, it's great to
see
have
you
you.
guys later. Take care.
See ya.
Bye, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. See you. Bye.
Let's see.
I hope there's a link to that art thing somewhere.
I'm sure it's in the Hubs Discord,
I'm sure it's somewhere.
if nowhere else.
Which
Okay.
the Annie?
The animation one, yeah.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me just pass you the Discord link. Invite people. Oh. There are no invite links. Okay. And it's not in the Hub's Discord at the moment. Okay, that is weird. Okay, let me give you the website link, because that will give you access to the films, and you will have to create an account, but there's nothing crazy that's required for that. But once you log in, you will be able to see the films and visit the WebXR space. Actually, I just let me log in. I will also get you the WebXR link. Just hang on a second. A link to the Hubs room. Yes, seems like they've just changed over to Community Edition.
What's a BIRP? I don't know that acronym, that alphabet soup.
Built-in render pipeline, I think he means.
Okay.
Okay.
Does Unity still have the two pipelines that haven't switched completely
The
over to
URP and
HDRP?
HDRP and the built-in, I think that's still the case, yeah.
Oh, wow.
D-Panther is very enthused about that.
I just remember, like, 7 years ago or something. I feel like it was like around the time the PS4 Pro came out that they had the HDRP or something like this, and I always grossly assumed it would they would just like get rid of the old one and switch over to the new one at some point, but I guess not.
We are old. Yeah.
All right, we're coming up on the 2.5 hour mark, so I think it's about time to wind down. At least I need to head out soon.
Fair enough.
Sure.
Yeah, if you do that extraction to the web worker, I'd be super curious how that goes.
Definitely, yeah. I need to set up Hubs Compose on my local machine, probably. But yeah, if I make any progress on that, I will absolutely be posting about it, because that has been just such a frustrating thing to deal with for so long. So.
Well, I mean, it also just opens the door to a bunch of other implementation incremental things that probably fundamentally help the sort of end user experience as well. That then I would imagine if somebody joined this and they saw like that glitch out, they might not be as forgiving as all of us are, and they might go, "Oh, this thing sucks. Never mind. Bye." As opposed to asking deeper questions about, oh, well, why does that happen and how easy is it to fix and whatever else. They might see that and go like, oh, this isn't ready. I'll go to, I don't know, to Microsoft Mesh or Roblox or something else. But yeah, if that can be decoupled in that way, it does then open up just general more possibilities for that plugin stuff that they were kind of working on, even for the non-visual stuff. Join forces in the Hub Discord. Oh, the thing I didn't mention earlier was, and I did mention in the Join Forces channel in the Hub's Discord, is my team and I, even though we're not shipping on WebXR to the majority of our customers, we're doing React Native instead. We have done a bunch of work in WebXR over the last about 14 or 15 months, and so we are thinking about kind of running an Indiegogo campaign to make a book called Enterprise Grade WebXR that kind of collates all of the kind of strategic level thinking about how we thought about WebXR and open source and open standards, but also some of the hardcore tactics around unit testing in React 3 Fiber, some of the fixes, some of the scenarios that we noticed with like React Force Graph that weren't XR compatible, and how the fixes we had to make to some of the React generic React 3 libraries around React 3.js that to get it in shape and then to add tests for it, and then also our experience with Babylon over the last 9 months since we kind of abandoned React 3 Fiber, where again there was not a lot of documentation for a lot of the things that we were doing around, especially around unit and integration testing and just general rigor around some of this stuff. Is that a crazy idea? Is that a dumb idea? Would anybody care about a book like that kind of codifies a bunch of the technical aspects and things like that? I had brought it up in the Hub's Discord because I was like, we could have a section where going from React 3 Fiber, which is a bunch of batteries not included, to Babylon, which is all of the batteries are included, to Hubs, which is like even more so probably, where the barriers are even lower, where you have to do even less to get something very functional sort of up and running. Is that a dumb idea? Would anybody care about a book like that?
I mean, I think it would be interesting. I think it has a high appeal to a very niche audience.
Yep. Yeah, I was trying to figure out a way to kind of, there's a bunch of good work that we've done that we could try to cram into a couple of conference talks to commoditize it before we forget everything we learned. But I thought a book might be a better choice, but then also having a book called Enterprise Grade WebXR would hopefully have a halo effect around it for, kind of general, kind of enterprise information technology managers and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of literature on WebXR at the moment.
There is not, and especially not high rigor. It's all.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of it's game oriented. Some people think I fucking love games. I've played games my whole life. My mom was a gamer. You fucking got me into gaming early. I love VR for games as well, but I feel like that's what the majority of the content is around. Is it about how do you structure a project so that you can scale an engineering team around it? There's some good stuff around optimization that are very specific to a specific browser on a specific headset, but nothing about how do you generalize these things across engines or across pieces of hardware. And I felt like this is a thing we were already talking about internally, like let's do it in a book, which also helps advertise the company, of course. But when the Hubs thing came up, I was like, oh, we didn't end up integrating with Hubs or doing a lot of a lot of coding work to try to integrate with hubs, but it might also be a way to boost the visibility of hubs once it's transferred over to wherever it's going to be transferred to. Let's see. I'll open the chat sidebar because I can't. I'm trying to open the chat sidebar. There it is. Imagine, what do you mean? That's probably a good idea then.
Making the
the
book.
the book. That sounds like a good idea then. Like it sounds like it could be really useful to people.
Yeah, I think so too. It's one of those things where I'm like, anything that we do that's not shipping the product is delaying the product being shipped, which then like delays revenue. But I'm like trying to find a way, just in the same way that I did like over the last 2 months, I've done a shitload of testing on the HTC Vive XR Elite and given them a lot of feedback in their support channels about their browser and other stuff about their hardware. And I'm trying to find this balance of being a good citizen in the ecosystem while running a business.
Are they still on like their own Wolvik fork on the XR Elite?
They are. It's fucking awful. Like it is. And again, anybody who accuses me of not giving feedback can go take a walk, can go jump in a lake. Like it is so ridiculously bad. And the thing is that the hardware, there's things about it that are actually really cool and good, but it's like they probably saved 50 cents on their bill of materials to make the controllers feel like garbage. Like they feel so cheap and shitty. It's unbelievable. There's stuff about the form factor that is interesting that I appreciate. But yeah, the browser is, they have their own system browser, which I think is like maybe Wolvik 1.1 or something. It's hard to get the version number out of it. They have a version of Wolvik on their app store, but I found out by talking to Agalia, that's not Agalia's build. That's HTC's own build.
Yeah.
So when I was like, can you update this? They were like,
we don't support that.
Well, they didn't publish it on the store.
Yeah.
HTC did. And so I went through HTC support 4 or 5 times now with different issues where the browser just doesn't work, and it's not fair. It's not fair to Wolvik. It's an old ass version of Wolvik. And their support is like, oh, you should post in the dev forums. And I just straight up said to the HTC support people, I'm like, are you telling me you don't support your web browser for consumers? That this is a developer-only tool? And they said yes. I'm like, great. This is one of those things. At least they're being explicit and straightforward about it, which I appreciate to some degree. But I really tried. I really gave it a lot of time and effort to figure out, like, okay, well, can we just change the way the promise gets rejected? Can we change our logic and our promise rejection so that we can be semi-compatible with this device? And it was like, after a while, it's like, there is not a partnership on the other side of this device, even an informal one, which was a bummer. But the good news is that Xreal seems to want to play ball, which is nice. But yeah, it's an old ass version of Wolvik. It's seemingly a bad build also, where there's stuff that was in that version of Wolvik or that works in that version of Wolvik on Pico 4 or the Quest 2 for that matter, that do not work on the Vive. And there's no reason for that to be. Like, the hardware has all the features that you would need. It's a bummer. I hope that the support feedback makes them go back to Agalia and say, hey, here's $5,000 or whatever else. Can you bring us up to date? Hopefully it shakes it loose, but I don't.
I doubt that would happen.
Yeah, I try to remain optimistic, but realistic at the same time. And I tried to reach out to Vive about an official partnership for, like, hey, you want enterprise apps? We're an enterprise app. Like, let's talk. And no. It was one of those conversations where I do the pitch deck. They learn about the team. Like, whoa, with this team, why aren't you making a multiplayer shooter? And I'm like, I thought you wanted a different price. And they're like, well, we do, but like you should be making a multiplayer shooter blockchain NFT, blah blah blah. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't know. The device is cool though. Like it's hardware wise, I would be excited about it. I have half a mind to reach out to their biz dev people and say, if you're gonna lose, you might as well open source everything, like except say it in a very nice way, because it's the controllers are just such garbage. Like I can't. They feel it's not even a premium feel. It's like the trigger is not consistently doesn't have a consistent click feel to it. It's kind of I don't know. It feels like it's bad. It's so weird. It's like why did you bother to ship this? Like if it got degraded to this point and you got your design verification test hardware, you probably should have seen like, oh, we should just not be in this business anymore, or we should take the marketing costs of advertising this thing and actually improve the software on our existing devices.
Are you sure they tested anything on it, and rather didn't just go straight to shipping?
Oh, I mean, I just know from working in consumer hardware that there's stages of there's electronics verification tests. Usually two of those, and then you have a design verification where it's not the final plastic, injection molds, but it's the form factor, so that you can figure out your thermals. And usually there's two design verification tests. I mean, I can't fathom you would skip any of those steps, because then you might ship something where you have FCC violations or regulatory body violations because you never could measure the like EM or RF interference coming off the device. Like there's a bunch of stuff there where you just plain old have to have the paperwork to show the world's governments that this device is not going to melt people's faces off or interfere with other electronics.
I agree that they wouldn't skip that, but just anything past that, it sounds like they're either skipping or not paying attention to quality-wise.
I don't know. I feel like they were paying attention. I feel like they made an explicit choice to, let's say, 50 cents and still charge $1,000 for this thing.
Oh, that's possible. It's like Mozilla did that a lot too. Of let's like a penny wise, pound foolish sort of thing. Let's see how much money we can get for as cheap a product as we can make, and do that.
Yeah, and even when I was at Sony, which very much considered itself a premium brand, there's a balance to be had, right? And how do you retain the continuity of the brand while having good margins on what you're selling? And it's a balance to be sure. But like for this, I feel like they specifically with the kind of plastic and materials that they used, that's where the fail is. And that's one of those things where you could kind of be at the very end of design and everything, and then make that choice, and then just watch it come out of mass production, and then you don't know. Like they're not broken, like they do work, but it just doesn't feel as good as all the other HTC controllers or headsets for that matter, which is just bizarre on a device that was selling for $1,000. To be clear, I got mine off Facebook Marketplace for $300, which is not a bad deal given for the hardware, but the boy howdy, the software is not there.
Oh boy.
And the browser's even further behind. It's a really good lesson in follow through for a device, and they are shipping firmware updates, but they're all eye tracking related, because they do have an add-on for this that has eye tracking. I didn't get that but definitely, obviously, their browsers don't support any of the eye tracking stuff.
Why do you think their software is so bad? Like what is causing that?
Well, there's aspects of their home experience, when you boot up and you're in a virtual environment. There's aspects of it that are smooth and cool, that are polished, and then there's other things that aren't. And pure hyperbole, but you ever play a game and you're like, wow, this first level's fucking amazing, but by the time you get to the end game, there's more and more jank. There's more and more texture loading issues. And it felt like they really polished like the first 10 minutes, and then they either ran out of time or budget for the rest of it. That's what it feels like to me.
Okay.
And it's having been a kind of a technical program manager for consumer electronics. It's really tough, and it takes it can be really hard when everybody's so focused on how does the user feel those first 10 minutes, and just polishing that stuff to like a sheen. You can spend a lot of time investing in that first time user experience and then kind of forget about the rest of it. Not forget, but by the time you realize how dire the rest of it is, you're just out of time or money or staffing. And it's I think it's a common misbalance. I don't want to call it a mistake. It's a tightrope balancing act that's really hard to get right. And how do you avoid that situation? Yeah, I think that you kind of, instead of thinking about things in terms of like quality of experience box, it's a time box where it's like, okay, first time user experience, let's say you have $1 million a month run rate, and for your OpEx, and how much of your design headcount are focused on first time user experience, how much of your user land engineering, like at the UI level, how much of your kind of kernel land, like drivers, firmware, like lower level, like a tool chain, like compilers, all that stuff. How much of that are you focusing on the first time user experience, which is typically kind of optimization work and kind of prototyping work while the UI sort of comes together. And you can kind of do it in such a way that you have basically that $1 million a month completely focused on just that first tip of the spear. And you can get to a point where you're iterating on that because it's the thing you have where you can react against it, right? Where you can go like, you can try it every month because you focus so much of your resources on it. There's actually something tangible there for you to react against. And you can be amortizing a lot of the optimization costs and other things that will show up in your later part of your experience. Versus, so if you spend like 90% of that $1 million a month on first-time user experience, and the other 10% on supportability, like all your crash reporting and all of your telemetry and other things, and then you kind of have no money left over for something else. So thinking about it in those terms at a portfolio level, it's like, well, if you spent 80% of that $1 million a month, so $800K a month, which is really 4 full-time headcount. Sorry, not 4 full-time headcount. 8 full-time headcount. It's not a huge number of people. And then you have one person on kernel level toolchain stuff, and one person on and one person on the other aspects of the experience. Like it's at some point it's still understaffed. Those other people don't have enough direction, can't make enough progress month by month to kind of give visibility to what the challenges are or to what the big challenges are. where it's like, oh shit, like we only had like one person spending 10% of their time on localization. And we just found out 1 month before ship that right to left languages are going to require a bunch of the UI to be changed around because the layout's not compatible with right to left languages, right? But if you didn't figure out if the first time user experience and whatever your high ambitions for that are, if you can't figure out does it work on the hardware, like will it literally fit inside the device? Hebrew, all kinds of right to left. Like at PlayStation, it was kind of Middle East in general was the opportunity market where their consoles aren't actively catered to that market. But what if you were one of the first ones to cater to that market, and you can get those first 100,000 sales in that market, and then you just get the brand momentum. But yeah, it's one of those. It is one of those things, and this like probably applies to what Mozilla was trying to do with the limited staffing they had, where it's like, okay, if you had just one person focus on localization, does that make sense? Versus, can the first time user experience be as amazing as it needs to be to differentiate and be competitive in the market? So so I'd say that's kind of looking at what's your total run rate. I'll tell you one thing that was my superpower across a bunch of companies, which was knowing what to outsource versus what to put full-time engineers on. And with outsourcing, you are probably paying, almost certainly you're paying a higher cost versus a full-time employee. But you can also only pay them for a month, and you don't have to pay them for the whole year. And so localization is one of those things where if you start that localization earlier and it costs you $20,000 a month, but you kind of figure out where all the bodies are buried in terms of your existing UI design layouts and stuff like that. If you learn that in the first 2 months, then you have time to adjust. And then all your designs after that are just take that feedback into account up front. And so like at PlayStation and Roblox, one of the big strategies I had was for things that are non-proprietary, farm it out. And at both of those companies, that was the first engineering outsourcing that they'd ever done for their kind of core engineering, core client engineering. And so it's like, how do you, at a portfolio level, just kind of look at how much are we spending? Are we kind of spreading the operational expenses across enough of these pillars early enough where you're getting holistic feedback about what's challenging versus what's not, so that's the kind of high level way to approach it, but there's a lot of nuance in all of that. And some organizations that are more design driven and not engineering driven, or that are more sales driven and not engineering driven, can be unbalanced by just the nature of who's got the loudest voice at the table when making those decisions about how to deploy the capital that you have. So to me, it definitely feels like those first 20 screens or first 20 clicks in the experience, it's pretty smooth. Like, and there's some cool stuff, like their default environment's cool. There is some spatial audio in it. But then it's like you go into the friends list, and for instance, and you immediately see this was not QA'd. No one, or it was QA'd, and it's kind of like with the meta browser, right? Where it's like, okay, either they have no QA, or they have QA and they ignore the signal from QA, or they didn't have time, or they don't make time, or whatever it is. So yes, it can be a challenge, but I think it's one of those things where it just takes 10 or 20 years of shipping products to see how unbalanced things can get. Even if that unbalanced thing is toward your bias, toward design, or toward engineering, or toward sales, whatever your bias might be. Of course, like you're like, well, that's my bias. Like, of course, that's the best idea. It just takes probably shipping a couple of dozen products to realize what the ultimate outcome of those unbalanced things are, even if it's an unbalance that you happen to prefer, before you start to go like, how do you holistically balance these things? And so doing more of a breadth up front, so you have more points of feedback across more areas of the product, is probably the strategy that I would generally advise if you've got the capital to even do that. So it just really depends on what your run rate is. But even at like $1 million a month, that sounds like a lot of money. But when you think about it in terms of all the shit that has to get done, it's not. It can be really tough where you know you're blind in one area, but there's kind of nothing else you can do about it within your means. It can be, really challenging. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah. I have a follow-up question. I'll put it in the chat. That kind of goes with that. But like, so rather than being blind in one area, what if you're low sighted in all areas? Is that better? Do you think?
At least you're getting a breadth. I don't know. Like to me, at least you're getting a breadth where it's like, okay, I have low staffing in like 5 different areas, as opposed to really great staffing in one area. And so what you're really kind of doing there from a probabilistic and statistic perspective is, okay, well, I am getting some feedback on localization. And let's say I'm only getting 10% coverage in that area. But in that 10%, I might learn something that would be fatal in the end game of shipping. Oh, by memory. And so I'd probably still favor breadth, depending on how much runway I had. So if I had like $1 million a month for 14 months, that's another thing to take into account. Versus I have $1 million a month for 6 months. That's tough. And I'm shipping a product. I'm not building something to get further investment, right? Because if you're building something just to get further investment, then of course you're going to focus on the first 10 minutes, right? But if you're shipping something that you want to support that has like a reasonably sticky, deep experience that doesn't drive users away, right? That's a tall order. So I probably still favor the breadth, but I think that some people get into kind of fractional people's time, where they're like, oh well, Janice will spend 1/3 of her time doing this and 1/3 of her time doing it, 1/3 of that I find never works.
Right.
Those people then can't get their own footing in, like they're even if you're working sustainable hours, like 30 to 40 hours a week, people get frazzled. There's not enough stuff that they can develop a holistic opinion on or go deep enough on sort of all at once. So I would still probably go for breadth, even if it's understaffing things slightly, just because my personal preference is to discover as much risk as early as possible. Like, is there something that's existential to all of this where, hey, if we get to the end of, where we will get to the end of 9 months and find that we can't ship in Europe or whatever, right? That's existential to even shipping that thing, or the monetization that you're kind of calculating. And if you can learn that in month 2 or 3 instead of month 9, you just didn't spend $7 million more dollars just to find out that your business will be upside down.
Which kind of happened to Mozilla. The Hubs is not GDPR compliant, so they can't really sell to anyone in Europe.
Yeah. And I mean, and I would hope that was a choice on their part, rather than a vision impairment sort of situation. Given all their other focus on privacy and stuff, I would hope that was a.
People asked about that, and there wasn't a clear "this was a choice" answer that was responded.
I can't imagine that across Firefox, VPN, and all the other products that are explicitly GDPR compliant, that there wasn't enough interest or knowledge saturated in the organization. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But that is a really good example. So when I was at LG and I was a program manager in WebOS, this is before GDPR was instated as a law that had to be kind of observed, but we could kind of see legislatively in the US and the EU and the UK that things were trending in this direction. So the big challenge that we had from a UX perspective was, and implementation perspective, was that kind of right to be forgotten, where if someone agreed to the EULA, agreed to send us extra analytics, but then later changed their mind, that reversibility was a fuck ton of work. And rightfully so. As a consumer, I believe in it. But from a program management perspective, it was kind of like, you know, there were 8 other tentpole features to be done on WebOS for LG televisions that year, and this was going to knock out the scope of this was going to knock out half of them. And so then it's a business decision about, do you ship the thing with it out being compliant when you know the law is going to pass, and wait to be tariffed, or wait to be, you know, what's the word when they kind of hold it at the shipping docks? There's a word. There's a word. Anyway, it was a real risk, but it was a business decision.
Okay.
Yeah, where it's like, but that for me is the kind of thing where it's like, if we're going to do this, let's not try to finish these 8 features and then do it. Let's hoist this to the front. This, because it's a bunch of data, like literally database table stuff, where it's like, oh shit, if we start removing rows from these tables, which is not a workload these databases have had, what does it do? And it's not even being pessimistic. It's like, it's just pure question marks. Does it cause a certain kind of fragmentation that causes the indexing to break down? And there's all these kinds of things, just from years and years and years of shipping shit, where I'm like, there's a bunch of failure modes here that could then make it that we ship this thing, and only when you have 1 million users logging in for the first time, the data center catches on fire, which is also not great on Super Bowl Sunday or whatever other big TV buying times of year. But so for me personally, I always go let's hoist the risk to the front, and then everything after that is icing, because then once you kind of de-risk the big risks, to me it's like you can think a lot more clearly instead of constantly having to worry on your mind, which is its own kind of cognitive load, which in general, and in other ways also, if you don't have if it's not like a safe working environment, that's a cognitive load that can hold people back from doing their best work. And if people have a bunch of things like, okay, yeah, we made this button, the radius border on this button amazing, and animate in HDR at 60 FPS, but we might get banned in Turkey, or we might, or whatever. It doesn't. I don't know. That might also be my anxiety PTSD brain, in the way that it operates is, let's just deal with the biggest worries first, and then once they're out of the way, you never have to think about them again. Or that no, this doesn't just consume 50% of the oxygen; it consumes all of the oxygen. And sometimes there's a back and forth with the ultimate business stakeholders about that, where because they have more skin in the game than you do. But one of the nice things about having my own company right now is that I'm the stakeholder, so I can make the dumb decision to spend a month on the Vive and try to get all the feedback and figure out, is this operationally feasible? Because there are enterprise customers that do have Vive focuses and things like this, and figure out, is this viable at all? And while I'm doing it, how much feedback can I give to like Babylon JS? Like, they had a PR up with some playgrounds, and I tested it on all 5 devices that I have, because I want to make sure Babylon has that feedback loop. Is that the best use of my time, strictly speaking? Maybe not, but I've also found that open source karma points can tend to kind of
build up.
It can just build up and be with interest if you it's not always anticipatable in what ways it'll pay back later. And so, like with the Babylon team, I did a bunch of early work with open source .NET stuff in Mono, and when I was at Blue Jeans, we worked with Microsoft to bring React Native Windows to Windows 7 and 8. I worked with the Chakra Core team as well in open source, and did conference talks and did customer testimonials for all that stuff for them. And that turned out to be super useful with the Babylon folks later. And not because I was predicting it would, or I was planning on cashing that in later. This is the right thing to do. But yeah,
hey guys,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but
Sorry.
I'm about to head out, so stream will also be down. You guys are free to continue for as long as you'd like, but just letting you know I'm heading out.
All right. See you
Okay.
later, man.
All right, see you.
See you.
I'll exit as well.